This seemingly simple piece of cavalry equipment has become one of my favorite pieces of horse tack while on campaign. The reason for this is simply that this is like the perfect junk drawer for anything you want to stick in here when you're riding and trying to access a whole bunch of different equipment. If you don't have room in your pocket here, or you're reaching the saddlebags while you're riding, the nose bag has become basically the quote junk drawer of the cavalry. I mean, seriously, this thing is perfect to keep extra pieces of hardtack that I've been working on, gnawing on while I'm riding 30 or 40 miles in a day, and I don't want to reach in here, I don't want to get back there, I can just stick it in my nose bag and it's perfect. And it's also great to store extra ammo, even tools, or forage like fruit, bread, or maybe the unsuspecting chicken that you can shove in there that's soon to become dinner later on that night. The point being that as an individual riding with all of my equipment when I do on campaign, camping, at a reenactment, whatever, is that had I been an original soldier during the American Civil War, I totally would have seen myself using my nose bag as the ultimate junk drawer or horse-powered glove box. And as I just said, I would have never realized this or come to this conclusion had I not been a living historian or reenactor myself. Again, you can only understand and picture so many things by reading books of cavalry on campaign. And of course, this got me thinking, if I'm doing this, would the original cast more than 160 years ago have done the same thing? Meaning, did they use the nose bag as an easy place to store things that they may need to access while riding, where you can't just hop off, access your saddlebags, maybe, access your wagons or anything like that? Like, did they do what I find myself doing? And as an addition to that question, how common was the actual nose bag being used for federal cavalry? Obviously, it was a piece of standard issue equipment, but in Congdon's compendium and other manuals, actually, it does say that the nose bag should be issued not as a piece of the standard equipment of the whole McClellan saddle tax system, but as an as-needed item when cavalry were going to be on campaign, patrolling, or doing something that they would need both their grain or ration bags for the horses, which then in addition would mean they would need the nose bag. So it wasn't a guarantee that if they had the McClellan set of tack, they wouldn't necessarily have the nose bag. So for fun, let's dive into the research arsenal, look at some letters, maybe even some orders, and see, whether were nose bags even mentioned as far as being issued to troopers and how did they use them, how did they use them. And of course, after that, we're gonna dive into the ordnance returns to actually count the numbers for a few regiments and see how common they actually were. So let's start at the very beginning and talk about the actual design and construction of the nose bag according to the Ordnance Manual. The first description from the Ordnance Department states that the nose bag should be of strong linen or duct of not less than 12 ounces to the yard of 28.5 inches. The bottom to be of pure oak tan russet harness leather or the best quality, 9 inches in diameter and 2.5 inches deep, pressed in a convex mold and firmly sewn to the body. The head strap with a number 8 buckle and a standing loop sewn to the top and fastened by 2 copper rivets. The head strap billet to be sewn and fastened by 2 number 1 copper rivets sewn to the top of the body and an inside leather washer by the same seam and fastened again by copper rivets. The width of the bag at the top would be 15 inches and the whole height of the bag also being 15 inches. The head strap and the billet 1¼ inches wide of good bridle leather and the first 27 inches long and the latter 38 inches long. And as a kind of a trivia side note, if you actually look at other contracts let during on in the war, they actually changed it to be about 6 inches in diameter instead of 9 inches. And then later they specify 4 inches deep rather than the 2.5 inches deep for the bottom of the pan. And for whatever it's worth, the rest of the description is pretty much the same on the contracts let later on in the war. So whether you have a 6-inch or 9-inch diameter nose bag made out of cotton, duct, or linen, this piece of tack is definitely an invaluable tool to the trooper, or at least in my opinion. Now let's try to find out how common they were or how widely used they might have been. Poinset's Cavalry Tactics Manual only mentions nose bag once and simply states, when nose bags are used, they will be attached to the pommel on the off side. If you look at Congdon's compendium, it mentions nose bags in the exact same context, and Cook's Cavalry Tactics Manual doesn't even mention nose bags at all, or at least as much as I could find. And the only other reference I found when it comes to nose bags states that the nose bag will be issued or used along with link straps when specially required. Then moving on to the ordnance returns, which by the way, the Federal Cavalry did track every single nose bag that was issued to the troops in the field during the war, so that was really helpful. So as you can see here, I hopped on the research arsenal, and then I filtered all the Federal ordnance returns by cavalry and thumbed through a lot of different cavalry regiments. And since I'm kind of lazy, and since I'd already written down all of the details of the Michigan Brigade during the Gettysburg campaign, I figured we can go ahead and use them again for a more detailed picture on how many nose bags there were, at least on that campaign, for the Michigan Brigade. So starting off with the 1st Michigan reported having 229 nose bags. And assuming the number of carbines in that regiment was relatively close to the number of troopers in that regiment, means that the 1st Michigan had about 91% of their troopers outfitted with nose bags. The 5th Michigan reported 356 nose bags while they were on the Gettysburg campaign. And with the same assumptions of the kind of comparing carbines and saddles to the number of nose bags, that means about 74% of the 5th Michigan also had nose bags. The 6th Michigan had about 37, which actually obviously on the low end, percent of their soldiers had nose bags. And the 7th Michigan had more than 100% of their troopers outfitted with nose bags. And these numbers, again, jump really depending on what regiment you're talking about, which again, goes back to the old adage as it really depends on what regiment you're talking about and at what point or time frame in the war that you're questioning. You can find entire regiments without a single nose bag, and again, you can find entire regiments that have double the number of nose bags that they do horses in the field. Now, as a side note to this whole conversation of 74, 24%, 34%, whatever it is to be more accurate, it'd actually be better to go to these regiments' morning reports and compare the actual number of soldiers fit for duty that day and compare that to the number of nose bags they had that day when they reported or where they did their quarterly ordnance returns. But of course, we don't have that much time for this video, so we'll save that for another video. Either way, you can pretty much sum up by saying nose bags were definitely a common piece of equipment or tack for the cavalry trooper in the field. But the question still remains, is there any proof that shows that original troopers in the Civil War used their nose bag as a junk drawer like I like to do? So the next place we're going to look is any letters, written documentation, even say orders that may have come out. And to be honest, I didn't really think I would find a quote smoking gun that indicated any clear abnormal use of nose bags. But I was just trying to find something that may mention them and indicate, hey, were they there? Did they use them? How common were they? Because again, from experiential archaeology or being a living historian, man, it just seems natural to just shove stuff in these things when you're on campaign riding, not actually using the nose bag for its later intended purpose. So then I text searched more than 40,000 letters, like letters home to either girlfriends, family members, or whatever, from troopers, cavalry troopers in the field. And I only came across 2 mentions of nose bag, and it was from soldiers just describing to family back home a list of all the equipment they got issued. Actually, both letters just said, hey, I was issued a saddle and a crupper and a billet and this and that and the other. Oh, and a nose bag as well. So while it mentioned nose bag, it didn't really indicate whether or not or how they may have used them outside of the intended use for those nose bags. Then I searched regimental letter and order books, and I did come across a few interesting items. Order number 48, listed in the 15th New York Cavalry Ledger, stated the following on January 8th, 1864, quote, "No enlisted man of this regiment will hereafter be permitted to feed his horse upon the ground. If he has no nose bag, his company commander must procure one for him immediately and charge him for the one that he lost." Then order number 42 in December of 1863 of the same regiment states the following, quote, "When the men fall in for roll call at reveille, they must have their nose bags, brushes, and combs, and will after roll call be marched directly to the stables." After those two orders, there were, quite a few other mentions of nose bags, but like in the letters back home, all the other either orders or regimental letters just indicated a list of items in nose bags being one of those. I also searched through a bunch of regimental histories in which nose bags, when it did came up in the same context with no information on any abnormal use, which leads me to a conclusion that I kind of started with is while I use the nose bag as the proverbial junk drawer or horse-powered glove box while I'm riding, I have no primary reference, no proof that the soldiers would have done the same thing more than 160 years ago. So I'm curious what you guys think. For you reenactors and living historians out there that actually ride or are cavalry reenactors, do you do the same thing I do, or am I just weird? I don't know, maybe I shouldn't ask. Don't answer that question. Or for you just general historians, or for those who studied the American Civil War in general, is this something that either A, you even thought of, or B, or I guess, what are your thoughts on this? Because again, this is one of those questions that came out that I would have never even thought of had I not, done this experiential or experimental archaeology. It's just something you don't think of as being a thing. But I don't know, it just seems so natural that when you're riding, and again, when you use the nose bag for its intended purpose, it's on the picket line when the horse is done, unsaddled, you're grooming them, you give them the grain in the nose bag, they're eating it, right? But that's after you've already stopped. You're not riding your horse with the nose bag on the horse. And so it's there on the offside on the pommel, and it's empty at that point in time, generally speaking, because if you do have grain, generally you have a grain sack either on your pommel or on your cantle. And so it's just this empty case that it's just really nice to kind of just throw stuff in there that's easy to access when you're riding without having to dig in a bunch of different pockets. And so I really am curious, guys. Go ahead and comment below on what you think about this entire concept. Again, is it something you think they would have done, or am I just the weird one and using it completely different than what the original cast would have done? Now again, you could go either way. Either I'm the weirdo, or maybe the original cast might have done the same thing. And I really recommend doing your own research. Again, hop on the Research Arsenal, join one of the largest growing research communities out there for the American Civil War, and just kind of deep dive both on the photos, letters, orders, and regimental ledgers that you can actually see, and you can find some pretty interesting things. And by joining that database, you do support this channel, and it helps us continue putting out these videos and giving you more letters, archives, and ledgers for the database. Thanks again for watching, and as always, until we see you in the field next time, ride hard.